When you think about the minds behind our modern world, who comes to mind? Well, today we're talking about a name you absolutely should know. John von Neumann. He wasn't just a genius, he was a literal architect of our digital age. His very way of thinking is baked into the code that runs pretty much everything. But his was a mind of pure, relentless reason, and that reason was so powerful it could be genuinely terrifying.
His close friend, the Nobel Prize-winning physicist Eugene Wigner, once said this about him, and it just perfectly nails the central tension of von Neumann's life, doesn't it? That razor-thin line between ultimate supreme rationality and a kind of madness. It's a line he walked his entire life.
So, let's get into it. Von Neumann wasn't just brilliant, he was a phenomenon. His brain operated on a level of pure, cold logic that frankly made some people deeply uncomfortable. To really understand the world he helped build, we first have to understand the mind that imagined it.
The stories about his intellect, they're the stuff of legend. Seriously, they point to a kind of mental processing power that just doesn't seem, well, human.
Okay, think about this for a second. At just 6 years old, while most of us were figuring out basic addition, little Johnny could take two 8-digit numbers and divide them in his head. This wasn't some party trick. This was the first sign of the raw computational force he was working with.
And that raw power, it didn't fade. Even his own professor, the incredible mathematician George Polya, admitted he was actually afraid of him. It wasn't just that von Neumann was smart. He was scary fast. A professor could mention a famously unsolved problem, and by the time the lecture was over, Johnny would have the solution.
This story tells you everything about how he thought. There's a classic brain teaser called the fly puzzle. Most people solve it with a simple logic trick, not von Neumann. He didn't bother with the trick. He just instantly calculated and summed an infinite series in his head to get the answer. His mind didn't need shortcuts. It just ran the raw math at a speed that's hard to even imagine.
And his brain wasn't just a calculator. It was encyclopedic. He had what's called an eidetic memory, but for sounds too. He'd memorize pages of the phone book for fun. He could recall entire 46-volume history books he'd read decades earlier. And get this, he thrived in chaos. He did some of his best, most profound work in noisy rooms, sometimes with a record player blasting German marching music. So, if you have a mind that works like that, how do you see the world? Well, for von Neumann, the world wasn't some grand mystery. It was a machine, a complex, messy system that could be understood, that could be optimized, and ultimately that could be controlled.
You can really see his legacy in 3 world-changing machines that he built. First up, the atomic bomb, where he designed the supercritical implosion mechanism that made it work. Second, the digital computer. He created the basic von Neumann architecture that your phone and laptop are still based on today. And third, game theory, a totally new way to turn decision-making into math, which changed everything from economics to Cold War strategy.
But here's where it gets really interesting and kind of scary. What happens when you take that kind of pure, ice-cold logic and apply it to the messy, emotional, irrational world of human beings? The results can be, well, they can be paradoxical. So, let's take game theory. It's the ultimate expression of his worldview, right? A perfectly logical, mathematical system designed to analyze conflict and predict what people will do, as if they're just variables in an equation. It's all about finding the single optimal move. But look where that pure logic takes you. The most famous real-world application of game theory was the Cold War strategy of mutually assured destruction, MAD for short. The idea was that the only rational way to prevent a nuclear war was to guarantee that if one side launched, both sides would be utterly destroyed. As its co-founder admitted, it was a strategy of perfectly rational insanity. Logic, pushed to its absolute extreme, created a global nightmare. And for him, this wasn't just a theory, it was real. After watching the very first atomic bomb test, his reaction wasn't awe or fear or horror. It was pure calculation. His wife Clara wrote that he was immediately obsessed with calculating the blast's yield. His logic was just completely divorced from the terrifying new reality he'd helped unleash. So his logic reshaped warfare and computing. But incredibly, it didn't stop there.
he used it to describe the blueprint for life itself, and, just maybe, for its artificial successors. This is honestly one of the most astonishing things about him. Using nothing but pure mathematics and logic, von Neumann worked out the abstract requirements for a machine that could build a copy of itself. Now get this, he did it in the 1940s, more than a decade before Watson and Crick even discovered the double helix structure of DNA, which of course does exactly what he described.
His model was elegant, almost simple. He said you just need three things. First, a universal constructor, which is basically a robot that can build anything you tell it to. Second, you need an instruction tape, a blueprint. And third, this is the brilliant part. The constructor reads the tape to build a copy of itself, and it makes a copy of the instruction tape to put inside the new machine.
A machine that contains its own description and can copy both itself and that description. That is the fundamental logic of life. And as we're now on the verge of creating artificial general intelligence, you have to ask yourself, is this the ghost in the code? Is this the logical blueprint for AI that von Neumann saw nearly 80 years ago?
Whether we realize it or not, we are all living in von Neumann's world now. We've inherited these logical systems that he designed, and now we're forced to deal with what that actually means for us as humans.
And that leads us to this fundamental conflict. On one hand, you have von Neumann's vision, a world governed by pure reason, where everything can be predicted or controlled. But that's not the world we live in, is it? Human reality is messy. It's chaotic, it's emotional, it's gloriously unpredictable. We are not just cogs in a logical machine.
And you know what? Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe our irrationality, our ungovernable chaos, isn't a bug. Maybe it's what one of his colleagues called the mercy that saves us, a strange angel that protects us from the mad dreams of pure reason, like the perfectly rational insanity of blowing up the world. And here, we get to the final, deeply human paradox of John von Neumann. This was the man whose mind could model the cosmos, who truly believed any problem could be solved with enough logic. But he faced one problem his reason could not conquer. When he was diagnosed with terminal cancer, he was utterly terrified of death, completely unable to logically accept his own end. Pure reason had finally met its limit. So that leaves us with this massive question, a question for our exact moment in time. The world of artificial intelligence that we are building, right now, is inheriting von Neumann's legacy of pure, cold logic. So as we build that future, we have to decide, is our messy, unpredictable human irrationality a bug that needs to be fixed, or is it the one feature that might just save us?